April 16, 1943, 32,000 feet above the Dutch coastline. The sky is a canvas of crystalline blue, torn only by contrails that write temporary histories in frozen vapor. Below, the patchwork fields of occupied Holland stretch toward a horizon where the North Sea meets the continent. In this moment, suspended between Earth and stratosphere, history is about to pivot on the wings of a machine that defied every convention of fighter aircraft design. Major Robert Johnson tightens his oxygen mask and scans the sky through the curved plexiglass of his canopy. Around him, 16 P-47 Thunderbolts of the 56th Fighter Group maintain formation, their massive radial engines thrumming a mechanical symphony at 2,300 revolutions per minute. Each aircraft weighs 7 tons at combat load. To put this in perspective, that's more than twice the weight of the nimble Spitfires and Messerschmitts that have defined fighter combat since 1939. The Germans have a nickname for these American behemoths, Jabo, slang for fighter-bomber. But there's another name, whispered with derision in Luftwaffe ready rooms across occupied Europe, Der Dick, the Fat One. Today, that mockery will turn to respect, written in tracers and terror. 6 months earlier, when the first Thunderbolts arrived at British airfields, even Allied pilots questioned whether Republic aviation had lost its collective mind. The P-47 was an anomaly, an aircraft that seemed to violate fundamental principles. Fighter pilots of 1943 believed in certain truths. Agility trumped armor, lightness enabled maneuverability, and dogfighting prowess determined survival. The P-47 rejected all of it. Its designer, Alexander Kartveli, had embraced a different philosophy entirely. Born in Tiflis, Georgia, in the twilight years of the Russian Empire, Kartveli understood that war was not an exercise in elegance but in brutal mathematics. When the U.S. Mark Army Air Forces demanded a fighter capable of escorting bombers deep into German territory, he didn't design a graceful interceptor. He designed a flying fortress built around the most powerful engine available, the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 Double Wasp, 18 cylinders arranged in 2 radial rows, 2,000 horsepower at takeoff, and the turbo supercharger installation that would change everything. The numbers told a controversial story. Empty weight, 9,900 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight, 17,500 pounds with drop tanks. Wing area, 300 square feet. Wing loading that made aeronautical engineers wince. The cockpit sat so far back that pilots joked they needed binoculars to see the propeller. Ground crews counted 8 50 caliber Browning machine guns mounted in the wings, each capable of firing 800 rounds per minute. That's 6,400 rounds per minute of combined firepower when all guns fired in unison. But could this heavyweight actually fight? The answer arrived not through dogfighting prowess, but through understanding energy management in three-dimensional space. What the Thunderbolt couldn't do in a turning fight, it revolutionized in vertical combat. The turbo supercharger, housed in the aircraft's massive rear fuselage, maintained engine power at altitudes where German fighters gasped for oxygen. At 30,000 feet, while Focke-Wulf 190 pilots fought sluggish controls and fading power, Thunderbolt pilots still commanded full authority. But the true revelation came in the dive. When Major Robert Johnson pushes his control stick forward that April morning, physics takes command. 7 tons accelerates downward under the patient pull of gravity. The Thunderbolt's thick wing, so criticized for reducing maneuverability, now becomes an asset. Its structural strength tolerates load factors that would tear the wings from lighter fighters. Airspeed builds, 300 knots, 400, 450. The controls stiffen as dynamic pressure increases, but the Thunderbolt remains solid, stable, controllable. Below, a Messerschmitt Bf 109 pilot glances up and sees death descending. He banks hard, trying to evade, but the closing speed differential is devastating. Johnson's gunsight pipper tracks across the German fighter's fuselage. His thumb presses the firing button. 8 streams of 50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds converge. The effect is catastrophic. The Mi-109's thin aluminum skin disintegrates under a hurricane of projectiles. Each 50 caliber round carries 13.2 grams of explosive incendiary material. Do the mathematics. 6,400 rounds per minute means over 100 rounds per second. Even a 1-second burst delivers killing force measured not in hits but in complete structural destruction. The Messerschmitt pilot never has time to react. His aircraft transitions from controlled flight to debris cloud in less than 2 seconds. Word spreads through 8th Air Force fighter squadrons. The Thunderbolt isn't a dogfighter, it's an energy fighter. Pilots learn new tactics, abandoning the circular knife fights that defined Battle of Britain mythology. Instead, they master boom and zoom, dive from altitude advantage, deliver devastating firepower, then use momentum to climb back to safety before enemy fighters can react. The Germans call it Kampf training, combat training, but there's no training that prepares them for the sheer kinetic violence of a Thunderbolt attack. Colonel Hubert Zemke of the 56th Fighter Group codifies the doctrine. Maintain altitude, preserve energy. Never get drawn into slow-speed turning engagements. Use the dive speed that no German fighter can match. The P-47 can reach 550 miles per hour in a dive before encountering compressibility effects that wouldn't be fully understood until transonic wind tunnel research after the war. German fighters attempting to follow experience control flutter, structural failure, or simply can't keep pace. By summer 1943, Luftwaffe intelligence reports express grudging respect. One captured document, translated by Allied analysts, describes the Thunderbolt as extremely dangerous in diving attacks and warns pilots to never attempt to follow in a dive. The mockery has ended. The reality has set in. The statistics accumulate like layers of sediment, each sortie adding to the geological record of aerial combat. By December 1944, Thunderbolt units have claimed over 3,000 Luftwaffe aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat. The final tally, compiled in the war's aftermath, reaches 3,752 aerial victories. This represents more than 25% of all German aircraft shot down by U.S. Army Air Force's fighters in the European theater. But numbers alone cannot capture the psychological dimension. Luftwaffe pilots, already stretched thin by attrition and fuel shortages, must now factor Thunderbolt tactics into every mission. The knowledge that attack can come from above at speeds exceeding one's ability to respond creates constant stress. Formation discipline deteriorates. Bomber interception missions become fraught with the need to maintain vigilant overhead watch. The Germans try climbing higher, but the Thunderbolt's turbosupercharger maintains performance at 40,000 feet, altitudes where most Luftwaffe fighters become barely controllable. There are stories, documented in mission reports and personal accounts, that illuminate the human dimension of this technical superiority. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski, leading ace of the 56th Fighter Group, describes the moment of release when diving on an enemy formation. You feel the acceleration press you into the seat. The airspeed indicator winds up like a clock being overwound, and you know, absolutely know, that nothing they're flying can match this. It's not cockiness, it's physics. The Thunderbolt's weight, so derided in early assessments, proves life-saving in ways that transcend performance metrics. The aircraft's structure incorporates armor plates surrounding the pilot, behind, below, and on the sides. The engine's radial configuration creates a massive barrier of steel and aluminum between pilot and frontal attacks. The self-sealing fuel tanks, developed through painful lessons learned in earlier combat, prevent catastrophic fires from bullet strikes. Major Robert Johnson's survival on June 26, 1943, becomes legendary. Returning alone from a mission over France, he's intercepted by Oberleutnant Egon Mayer, one of the Luftwaffe's most skilled pilots. Mayer's Falve 190 pours cannon fire into Johnson's Thunderbolt. The tail surfaces shred, the canopy shatters. Rounds punch through wings and fuselage. Johnson counts over 200 hits. The aircraft should be unflyable, but the P-47's robust construction absorbs punishment that would doom lighter fighters. Johnson nurses the crippled aircraft across the English Channel and lands at the first available field. When ground crews examine the wreckage, they find unexploded 20mm shells wedged in structural members, stopped by sheer mass of material. This survivability creates a feedback loop. Pilots who survive combat gain experience. Experienced pilots achieve more victories. More victories degrade enemy capability. The Thunderbolt becomes not just a weapon system but a force multiplier through its ability to return pilots to combat. As the war evolves, the Thunderbolt discovers a second calling. Its ability to carry ordnance, 2,000 pounds of bombs or 10 5-inch high-velocity rockets, transforms it into a devastating ground attack platform. The same structural strength that enables high-speed dives now tolerates the violent maneuvers of low-level attack runs. Pilots strafe German columns, airfields, railway marshalling yards, and communication centers. The 850 caliber machine guns prove equally effective against locomotives, trucks, and reinforced positions. The German army learns to fear the sound that precedes destruction. The distinctive howl of a Thunderbolt's R2 800 engine in a shallow dive, followed by the tearing canvas roar of 50 caliber fire. In Normandy, during the breakout from the beachhead in July 1944, Thunderbolt groups fly close air support missions that turn German counterattacks into killing fields. After-action reports describe entire panzer columns halted, not by strategic bombing or artillery, but by waves of P-47's that methodically destroy vehicles, creating impassable blockages of burning wreckage. The final accounting of the Thunderbolt's war extends beyond the 3,752 aerial victories. 15,643 aircraft were built. They flew more than 546,000 combat sorties across every theater of war. They destroyed more than 7,000 locomotives, 9,000 pieces of rolling stock, 6,000 armored vehicles, and 68,000 trucks. These aren't merely statistics, they represent the systematic dismantling of an enemy's ability to wage war. But what does this machine teach us about the nature of technological conflict? The Thunderbolt's success emerged from rejecting conventional wisdom in favor of understanding fundamental physics and operational requirements. Kartveli and his team at Republic Aviation didn't build the fighter that existing doctrine demanded. They built the fighter that strategic reality required, an aircraft capable of fighting at extreme altitude, surviving intense combat, and returning its pilot home. The German pilots, who initially mocked the Thunderbolt's size, learned a harsh lesson about the difference between elegance and effectiveness. War, ultimately, rewards not the most graceful solution but the most practical one. The P-47 Thunderbolt was never beautiful in the way that a Spitfire or Mustang captured aesthetic imagination. It was functional, brutal, and devastatingly effective. As the contrails fade from that April sky over Holland, as Major Johnson and his squadron turn for home with another victory marked in gun camera film, we might consider what this represents. 3,752 Luftwaffe fighters destroyed means 3,752 German pilots killed, captured, or wounded. Behind those numbers are families who waited for letters that never came, children who grew up without fathers, and a nation that spent its young men in service of an evil ideology. The Thunderbolt didn't just win battles. It accelerated the end of a war that consumed 60 million lives. In this context, its 7 tons of aluminum, steel, and fury becomes more than an engineering achievement. It becomes a reminder that technological superiority, when applied to righteous purpose, can alter the trajectory of human history. The mockery ended. The victories accumulated, and the sky above occupied Europe slowly, mission by mission, sortie by sortie, became Allied airspace. The Jug had earned its place in history, written not in elegance but in the uncompromising language of physics, firepower, and the courage of pilots who took this improbable machine and made it legendary.